In City of God, from the very beginning, they show the sporadic opening of the chicken getting away, and immediately the guns are pulled out. In doing this, in the City of God, it establishes the relationship with weapons that the gang has, quick to draw, but with no thought. No one is safe from the weapons of violence because the war in City of God is total war. This is triggered by the loose depiction of how weapons are used. We see that emotion and survival in an impoverished area is more sporadic of a motive than the organized killing for power and economic control in The Godfather. This is shown from the end of the first scene of the film when Rocket, who is not involved in the gangs, is quite literally put in between two rows of guns from both the gang and the cops, showing how one can escape from the violence that the weapons brings in City of God.
In The Godfather and City of God, there is a distinct difference in the depiction of weapons that helps to form the sporadic tone of City of God and inversely forms the extremely organized madness that ensues in The Godfather. This forms a sense of total war within the City of God that is not present in The Godfather.
In this first scene, the director shows Blackie pull out a gun and before he finds out who it is, point it towards the door as the visitor knocks. He only then relaxes once he realizes that it's Lil Zay. This shows how guns were being used with no thought. In this second clip, we see Lil Zay make Steak kill one of the two runts that they captured. This was purely driven off Lil Zay wanting to make a statement and induct Steak into the gang. As Lil Zay and the rest of the gang pull up on the runts, we see them freely carrying their guns as if it is normal. This leads to immediate chaos because 2 minutes later, one of the runts was shot by Steak, and all the rest of the runts had no idea why it was happening. In the third clip, we see in the last scene of the movie Lil Z's gang coming out with the guns while chasing a chicken. This perfectly sums up the theme of guns in this movie. Lil Zay then asks Rocket for a picture in the middle of the street with them holding up their guns. This loose and thoughtless act of pulling out their guns to try and flex for a photo is the perfect example of why guns were used with no thought throughout the movie. In this fourth piece of evidence, we have Benny celebrating his farewell party. There is music, dancing, drinks, and everybody seemed to be having fun. This was a time when everybody was able to come to the party because everybody liked Benny, as he was one of the only rational people left in the City of God. Soon though, more chaos ensues as we see Blackie with a gun and seemingly accidentally shooting Benny. This proves that guns are just a way of life, and it directly led to this tragedy. This ensues a total war between both sides of the city. While our thesis reigns true throughout most of the story, the one instance throughout the City of God where we see order and thought behind the guns was with Knockout Ned. Knockout Ned was a trained shooter and purely wanted to be a part of the fight just because of what Lil Zay did to his family. He called it a personal matter between them. As we see him gearing up with the opposing gang to Lil Zay, we see him continuing to question all the guns they were pulling in and giving to different people with all different reasons. We then see Carrot explain that they have to have people on their side, so they have to continually give out these guns. Although, ironically, the reason why Ned was killed in the end was because of one of these random kids coming in to take a gun and avenge their father's death.
Weapons, and more importantly the way they are used to depict the change in the gangs in The Godfather, from complete organization and calm control with The Godfather to the more sporadic use later in the film. Starting with the Don's death itself shows the use of guns and weapons as a dynamic plot development into the war that develops. This allows the rules and planning of the family to be tried and presents the central development of Michael stepping into the family business to restore this calmness. A moment when this is particularly evident is when Don Corleone is shot. This timed hit on the Don of the Corleone family is very much for Sollozzo to gain power, and is politically planned crime at that. This timing is very specific and is displayed further when they wait for the Don to be isolated when he gets the fruit. Another scene in the film where one of the Corleones is attacked is Sonny getting ambushed at the toll. Knowing Sonny's temper, they lured Sonny to the toll road and had a ton of hitmen lined up waiting for him to come. As soon as Sonny arrived up, he was immediately welcomed with machine guns from every direction and had no chance of survival. This shows how important Sonny was to the family because of how many hitmen they used for this assassination. Again, it was a politically planned crime on who at the time was the head of the Corleone family. Again, an organized hit on the Corleone family, strictly power-driven. The use of guns, and in this moment, lots of guns and shots, show Sonny's importance and the amount of power he holds. Michael, while staying on the outside of crime for all his life, officially joins the party when he kills Sollozzo and McCluskey. This was Michael's first murder for the family. Initiates him, and as soon as he fires the gun, he's officially part of the organized crime. Just like Clemenza tells him, he fires 2 shots to the head, wipes down the gun, and drops it without making eye contact with witnesses. Proper use of the gun and carefully thought out and planned. He had to step up to protect his family, to hold power, and to keep control. Lastly, the scene that wraps up the film, the baptism murders. Michael knows he cannot have direct affiliation with the murders of the 5 heads of the crime families and is at his godson's baptism, which was the perfect alibi. This scene ties up the entire film of organized crime, killing all the heads of the families efficiently and each with their own plans. All of Michael's men successfully murdered each of the planned hits, and each death was caused by a gun. This was planned crime at its finest to benefit and protect the Corleone family.
I do renounce them.
This careful execution and use of the weapons in The Godfather leads to much of the population outside of the families safe from the war and creates a contained tone to the War of the Families. Both have wars, but in The Godfather's diegesis, you're pretty much safe if you're a child, woman, or not in one of the families because there's not killing rampant in the streets. Each time a weapon is pulled, it's for a reason, to gain political or economic power to protect the character's family. Whereas in City of God, there is an overwhelming sense of total war due to the emotion and poverty-driven use of these weapons.
Depois de ano, parecia que ninguém mais se lembrava de como é que tudo tinha começado.